Hi, this is Estella, and I will be doing a radio program on women's sport, in particular basketball, and the issues surrounding it. Some of the main topics include comparisons between the NBA and WNBA, for example, the difference in wage rates of male and female athletes, endorsement opportunities, and how these issues can commonly be found across other sports where men and women compete in exactly the same way. Other issues I will be touching on include viewing between the NBA and WNBA as a franchise and individual players, and also how female athletes are viewed, including gender stereotyping and objectification. The WNBA began in 1996, which doesn't come to a surprise when we say they only began because it had to be approved by the NBA, the men's federation. It goes to show that since the beginning, the men have had the overall deciding decision on what happens in the basketball world. I know this happens in other sports as well, but what happens in the basketball world in terms of the success of male and female athletes. Now, everything in the men's and women's game is pretty much the same. They play with the same dimension of the court. They compete against people who are competing at the highest level as they are, who have got successes in all-American teams, college teams, and have often been the deciding factor in whether teams win, championships and things like that. Yet, there is such a difference in the ways each player gets paid. Now, the average viewership for the NBA alone is 7.42 million, in comparison to the female viewership, which is 202,000. Now that is a ridiculous difference in who watches the sport. Now people would say that this should be expected because women's sport isn't as fancy and exciting as the male sport. However, these women have not only competed at the highest level, they have come across the same obstacles as the men, and if anything, because of their scientifically proven lack of that extra athletic ability, they have had to work just as hard, if not harder, to make it where they are today. Now, the minimum team salary for the NBA, which is set at 90% of the salary cap, which is 63 million, and that was found in the 2015-16 season. Now, most of the top 3 vote-getters in the WNBA MVP voting are Candice Parker, Maya Moore, and Ella Delle Donne. They can make up to $105,000. Now, that is league regulations for the maximum salary allowed for an individual. Now, the average wage for an NBA player is $4.9 million, and that was a figure found in 2013. But in 2012, the top salary for a WNBA player was $107,000, and that's for players who have been in the league for 6 years alone. That was including endorsement opportunities, sponsorships, everything like that. So that means that these players are receiving less than half of what the average NBA player would get in an entire season. LeBron James, now this is a ridiculous figure, LeBron James, $30,963,450, and that's without endorsements. Yet he has now signed a Nike lifetime deal, whereas Candice Parker in 2014, with endorsements, who is one of the best players in the WNBA and the most iconic players, only received $300 million. Now, if you ask me, considering they're playing exactly the same sport, have worked just as hard as each other, why should they get paid any different? And these wages aren't enough to support these WNBA players, which means that they then have to go abroad to play for teams such as China and Russia to make up that extra cost. We can see that the WNBA doesn't have as much publicity or is as popular as the NBA, but it is a shock to me that people still in this day and age will make comments such as, if no one watches women's basketball, is there any point? Now, we have some stats and statistics which show that the internet searches between the NBA and WNBA are very shocking. Now, in the NBA's peak, they received 100 out of 100 internet searches, which is the highest you could get. in comparison to the WNBA, who their peak on internet searches remains at 1. Now, historically, opinions on the NBA are one of a very negative outlook due to people's attitudes suggesting that the Women's Federation is a waste of money for the NBA, as it is boring and is not watched by anyone other than fellow female athletes. I decided to argue this point, as female basketball players compete in exactly the same sport as men, and thus deserve to have their talent showcased and acknowledged by the world. A strong real-world comparison to highlight success in sport, which traditionally would have been seen as masculine fields, include the likes of Venus and Serena Williams on their ongoing success in international tennis competitions, and the triumph of the USA's women's soccer team, who came first place in the 2015 World Cup, way ahead of the men's team who only placed 22nd. There is not only a noticeable difference in the volume of internet searches between the WNBA and NBA as a franchise, this rivalry continues between individual players too, regardless of having similar credentials. Now, Ben Simmons was a number 1 overall NBA pick in the 2016 draft. He was then picked by the 76ers, becoming the 3rd Melbourne number 1 overall pick in 11 years. Now, Brianna Stewart, who was the 1st overall pick in the 2016 WNBA draft, is an All-American, went to the University of Yukon, leading her Huskies to 4 national championships, and she was named Final Four's most outstanding player for a record of 4 years. Now, from the internet searches, we can see that during Ben Simmons' peak, his internet searches skyrocketed to 100 out of 100 again, yet Brianna Stewart's remained at a consistency of 2. And Gilbert Arenas, who played for the Memphis Grizzlies, said he thinks he can save the WNBA. Get rid of all the ugly chicks who look like they belong in Orange is the New Black, and swap her out for hot chicks in thongs. That men still have a very narrow-minded view of what women are capable of, thinking that they need to be watched only for their bodies and not for the talent that they may have. This is one of the few opinions where spectators, who are more than often men, believe that women who compete in male-dominated sports, such as those who play in the WNBA, or even UFC fighter Ronda Rousey, who in September 2015, in an online ESPN poll, was selected as the best female athlete ever, get seen as sexual objects in their sport, would be more widely appreciated if they were to exploit themselves through, for example, wearing revealing clothing to provide entertainment for male viewers. This is contradictory, as the Lingerie Football League, the LFL, which has recently been renamed the Legends Football League, has a mass male viewing, yet the majority of these viewers often see these athletes as sexual objects, rather than elite women who work hard for their physique and ability to compete at the highest level. Now, I searched women's American football into Google, and the related searches often related to the sexuality of women rather than the sport they play, identifying them by their appearance rather than elite athletes. For example, some of the corresponding links that came up were links to Victoria's Secret, M&S lingerie, American lingerie, pictures of, and additional links such as Lingerie League on TV, giving people direct access to watch some footage. Now, this leads on to the objectification of women. The issue of gender stereotyping and sexual exploitation is reflected in the relevant everyday society across the world, thus having high cultural validity. These provide prime statistical evidence that women remain sexual objects for men, even in modern day society, which makes it less of a surprise that male viewers of female sports often have such strong opinions on the idea of changing the clothing of female athletes to appeal to them more. Additionally, one of the most openly known and internationally renowned chauvinists is current 2016 candidate for the US president, Mr. Donald Trump. Trump is known for having the ability to offend people day in, day out without any remorse, or getting away with it purely because of his status. Not only is he a misogynistic pig, he is racist, homophobic, and often attacking his opponents for their personal attributes rather than on a professional platform. Hillary Clinton doesn't have the fortitude, strength, or stamina to lead our world. She failed as Secretary of State. Don't let her fail us again. The list of Donald Trump's downfalls goes on. He even tweeted that if Hillary Clinton can't satisfy her husband, America. Once again, this shows him referring to his opponent's sexuality rather than focusing on the task. Now back to the LFL. So the LFL is a female variation of American football, but consists of athletes playing in minimal clothing with minimal protective pads being worn, competing in 7-a-side games. This is done on purpose. Implemented by the LFL CEO and founder, Michael S. Mortaz, who, shockingly, again, is a man. And his aim is to appeal to a wide male fan base. Although these athletes enjoy the same level of contact, bumps, bruises, these women do not receive half as many benefits as men do. One issue that the players in the NFL often is that they often go unpaid, which means that they have no choice other than to work 9 to 5 jobs alongside their sport in order to pay day-to-day essentials. Because of their lack of wages, these players are at high risk of having short careers, as, for example, if they get injured, they are unlikely to have sufficient funds to aid their recovery. Teams will mostly be named after powerful, victorious, masculine figures with the intent to instill fear into their opponent, e.g. the Atlanta Falcons, Minnesota Vikings, and Oakland Raiders. In contrast to the LFL teams, who are often named after sweet, pleasant connotations which sound more like titles for romantic films and adult movies rather than elite sporting competitive teams, such as Dallas Desire, LA Temptation, and Omaha Heart. Is this because of the image the franchise is trying to build around these women? Now, although these issues are things which people may find quite unimportant, I think they are still very relevant in everyday society because men and women still get paid differently in certain workplaces. They don't receive the same recognition for the work that they do. Yet, it seems to be okay for even the US president, who's meant to be setting a good example for his country, his followers, as a leader, still feels that it's okay to make passing comments about women and their sexuality rather than focusing on the success of these women and building them up to make them feel that there is equality in modern day society and they don't have to worry about being at a disadvantage purely because of their gender. Now, I hope this is giving you something to think about, and I hope that over time, women's sport as a whole, not just in particularly basketball, but every sport where women and men are competing exactly the same way, gets the same recognition, the same benefits, and they all get to play the sport that they love without having to worry about differences or difficulties that they may face purely because of their gender.
This mother